G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I've got the answers for at what distance do I zero my rifle. And yes, answers, because it's a multiple level of answers that go with that. To start off with, we need all the details. Is it rimfire? Is it centerfire? Is it hunting? Is it target shooting? Is it ELR? Is it this? What distance is relevant to what details that we're actually talking about? And I suppose I'll start off with in the place that most of the people will be looking at this channel with, which might be the other end of the spectrum to the average guy with a rifle. But the ELR or precision long range shooting, then it comes down to in that, and to do that you're using a tactical scope or a dialable scope, so you're planning on adjusting it to distance. Then it's a very simple answer. In a rimfire, 50 yards or meters, whichever you prefer, as long as you know where you're dialed to, then it doesn't matter which one it is, but 50 and 100 for your centerfires. Now the 50 for the rimfire, fairly obvious, it's sort of the normal distance you're sort of shooting to. 100 yards, even when it's out to 300 yards in that sort of stuff, it still is the right place to start at your 50 yards. Some might start closer. I'd always start at 50. If I'm shooting at 25, then you're holding under a little bit. You work that out. It's all dialable, but you are going to be using data and you dial to that. So that's 50 yards for a dialable, tactical target rimfire is where I would suggest there. On the centerfire, it might be less obvious, but it's 100. 100 for everything. That's 100 yards or meters. Once again, you know what you're dialed to. You make sure you've done that. All your data works to that. That's how it's set up. But 100. And the reason it probably gets confusing for some people is now we can talk hunting, which moves into a different place. We're not talking dialing anywhere near as much. We're talking where we are in the target tactical side of things, then we're dialing for everything. So 100 works absolute best because it's the smoothest way to use your data. Yes, you can set up and tell it you dialed it at 300, but you're actually doing more extrapolation. There's more work to it, and more than anything, there's no benefit to it. If you have dialed, if you've got 0 as 100 on your tactical scope, then everything dials up from there to where you're actually going to use that rifle effectively. And a lot of people would think, okay, if you're going to go out to 2 miles or 3,000 meters or 3,000 yards, that sort of stuff, then if you dial in, or sorry, you zero at 1,000, then you've only got to dial up 2,000. That means your scope can go further. It doesn't work that way at all. The simple thing is that you have to set your scope up to be able to get the maximum travel out of it to start off with. Done videos on that many times. There's other videos. We'll always link videos down below. But you have to approximately set up your scope on half of its internal elevation. So if it's got 100 MOA or 120 MOA of internal elevation, then you need to put it on a base and a ring set in whatever form that gives you around 60 MOA of cant. Then when you're zeroed, you'll be able to zero at 100, and you'll be able to dial up to the full 120 minutes of elevation, wherever that gets you to. So that is one side of it, but the other side of it is that there isn't that much MOA difference between dialing in at 100 or 400 or even 1,000. It's not that much, whereas the difference between 1,000 and 2,000 is monstrous, and between 2,000 and 3,000 even more, and 3,000 and 4,000 is even more. So for the understanding what your scope is, where you know where it's at all the time, you know it's starting from 100, works absolute best on that sort of level. It works best with all forms of data, all ballistic engines, so all your apps and that sort of stuff work best at your 100. It can work in other places, but it works best there in the way of getting a true zero down at that place. Even when you can't actually get to, or you actually are shooting at 600 yards for your first target, which we do sometimes, I still mathematically dial at 100. I zero at 100 and then work everything up from there. So how's that work? That means that I know that I'm supposed to have 10 minutes of elevation at 600, and I hit 600, I get it nice zeroed there, then I actually go that, okay, I have my apps telling me I'm dialing to where I want to have 0 at 100, I should have 10 minutes. I make sure I'm hitting at 10 minutes. Then effectively, mathematically, I've dialed it at 100 yards. I use yards, you might use your meters. Either way, that doesn't really matter. So the simple, uncomplicated thing is a rimfire with a dialable scope, 50. A centerfire with a dialable scope, 100. Now we'll move into what most hunters talk about in the way of their 0. Then it changes a lot. Now it doesn't need to, you've got a dialable scope and you actually want to use it for hunting, then you can still have the scope set to the distance you want to shoot. But in the way of if you've got a not dialing, I mean you want the caps on, you don't want to touch it all, you want to have it 0 to a place where you use it, then it becomes very much about the cartridge. Some will call it the caliber, but the round that you're shooting and what you're actually shooting at. In most cases in a hunting situation, particularly for our neck of the woods around here, which would be roos, foxes, pigs, that sort of stuff, then really your distance you're shooting in fairly open paddocks and that sort of stuff there is around the 200 to 300 yards. That's about it. Generally going to use a fairly flat shooting caliber, so a 6 Creedmoor, a 243, a 260 Remington, that sort of stuff is good at that type of thing. Lots of other choices obviously there, but then really actually zeroing at around 250 yards is a pretty good spot. That's about the place that you're going to shoot distance-wise. Nighttime, that sort of stuff, that's about the end of the shot. It's about the distance of where it'll be most consistently correct at, and then having it zeroed and put away at that level, it works really well for that side of things. You may be in a place where your more regular and consistent shot is going to be 50 to 150. So then you need to work out on how your rifle's set up, but then back to dialing it and having it zeroed at 100 is a more likely scenario. You go to where you are really shooting in what I would consider the end of the distances that you're generally shooting at, in the way of hunting, in the 500 or 600 meters, the 550, 650 yards is really the end of where it stops being hunting and it starts being sniping on animals, which is not something I would ever recommend. Then okay, that may be a case of where you are going to be able to zero at that distance and make it work properly with your reticle. I would generally say once you're in those distances, you should be dialing. Again, you should be actually range finding and dialing. Your difference in the shot can be too much. Once you're talking to where you've moved 3 inches, just 3 inches of drop that you weren't ready for, that can be the difference between a proper hit the zone and a proper kill, drop the animal, and a seriously injuring the animal to where it runs away. So in my way of looking at it, I would be dialing, and then in that same level, like I said, you can go back to centerfire. It's a dialable scope, 0 at 100, and you know if I'm out there actually shooting what I want to be, I want to pick it up, I don't want to dial, that sort of stuff, you know you have it set at whatever it requires to be at the 250 yards or 200 yards where you expect to run into things. And this can also move into the same place for people who are target shooting at one distance. They've got a dial, all that sort of stuff. Well, okay, all you do is shoot at the 600 yard range or at 1,000 range. That's what this rifle does. That's what that scope does. There's nothing wrong with having it 0 to that place. I'd make sure I could come down a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with having it 0 at that place. That's 0 to these conditions. Obviously, keep in mind in your zeroing a rifle, then we're just talking about distance, we're only talking about drop. We're only talking about elevation drop. Windage, that's another whole thing whatsoever. That moves into, now there's a lot of the even sniper world that want to talk holds all the time. Until it's zeroed, holds are only relevant to the conditions you're shooting in. So once again, I come back to, for a dialable scope, I'll come back to that 100 yards where I would zero the wind at. That's the least likely to have wind affecting it, especially with a centerfire. Not so much, and also the same thing back to 50 yards with a rimfire. Still can affect it, but doesn't affect it as much. Trying to find that dead calm day to actually get a wind zero, well, that's a pretty tricky thing. You're in a very, very still place. Okay, great. I tend to find even where it seems still, and yes, even though it seems to be windy all the time where we shoot, there is places in the shorter stuff that we get to shoot where it is still, but still isn't really still. I would, in that sort of zeroing rifle, it takes a few days, it takes sometimes a few weeks to make sure I've got a wind zero that makes sense. Obviously, the shorter range it in, the less that's affected, but I suppose that's the yeah, as it always is, a little bit more complicated answer. When it comes to it, rimfire, dialable, 50 yards. The centerfire, pretty much any of the hunting, target shooting cartridges, 100 yards, 100 meters, whatever that is. The hunting side of things, another whole place, really depends on your area. Generally, if you're going to bring wind and bits and pieces into it, this is it. You don't want to be able to do more. You want to be able to use it for any of those sort of shots. I've found generally the 250 yards, learning my holdovers to get to 600 yards does a really good job in that sort of scope. But that is very much about the cartridge, your scope you're running at that situation, and what you're actually hunting. Anyway, guys, that's a quick one there. I'm sure you've got lots of great advice to give us down below as to what you do. Thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.